Next up, we have the legendary Lugia. Having captured fans' hearts as the mascot of both Pokemon Silver and Pokemon the Movie 2000, the Guardian of the Seas has been regaled as one of the most majestic Pokemon ever. And of course, outside of the movie, I'm sure a lot of us have a lot of memories of getting the Silver Wing and going all the way to the Whirl Islands just to catch this thing, in both the original Gen 2 games and the remakes. Anyways, we want to find out if its signature Aeroblast terrified competitors as much as it did Lawrence III, so let's ask, how good was Lugia actually? And in this video, we'll be covering these competitive formats. One of a mere 5 Ubers in its debut generation, Lugia boasts absolutely titanic defensive stats that have given it the nickname the Great Wall, and even packs blazing speed to go alongside it. It blends these into a terrifying defensive-offensive hybrid that both walls many Pokemon and poses a threat itself with its flagship curse set. It's worth noting that Lugia is fast enough to still outpace many Pokemon after a curse, most notably Umbreon, Tyranitar, and Snorlax. With a 32 PP recover and the abundance of Heal Bell Celebi for status, it is a terrifying threat, especially with spikes down. It uses Whirlwind to rack up spikes damage on the opposing team, and if the opponent has a counter such as Zapdos or Skarmory, this assures Lugia will still do damage without burning through its Aeroblast. And since Aeroblast only has a meager maximum of 8 PP, it should only be used when Lugia is ready to assure KOs. But with Lugia's ability to easily stack up multiple curses, that really isn't a problem. In fact, Snorlax runs self-destruct almost solely to try and bait the near unkillable Lugia, and the usage of Zapdos and Steelix speaks to the giant white bird's presence in the metagame. Lugia is not Uber by default, and it is huge not only in appearance, but it is monstrously effective no matter how you slice it, and serves as a pillar of GSC Ubers. Now on to Gen 3. With the addition of the vicious new Groudon, Lugia took on a new role as by far the best counter. Between Reflect, Ice Beam, and Toxic, it was a horrifyingly difficult wall to break through, also completely dominating Rayquaza and making sure threats like Mewtwo, Kyogre, and the Lati twins weren't switching in scot-free either. Abilities being introduced this generation granted it with an ability that most legendaries have, and Pressure was also an incredible tool for PP stalling in drawn-out Stall Wars. It also gained the amazing move Calm Mind that let it go more on the offensive without sacrificing its amazing defensive utility. And with Whirlwind, it'd be able to destroy other common boosters such as Kyogre and the Lati twins. Since it does also pack a tremendous speed stat, decent attack stat, and a very powerful physical stab, it even has the option that most would never see it as, the option to go full out offensive with Choice Band. Its Aeroblast smokes most neutral Pokemon even without factoring in Aeroblast's high critical hit rate, and had a powerful Earthquake to destroy steals that would handle most Lugia sets pretty well, such as Jirachi and Metagross. Now, it couldn't touch Skarmory, but with Magneton now packing Magnet Pull, that was no longer an issue. Shadow Ball was also great coverage in the Psychic-laden metagame, especially since Deoxys Defense and other Lugia packed pressure to cut into Aeroblast's 8 PP and even hit the Kyogre counter extraordinaire Shedinja, which would also blank Lugia's main attacks. Overall, to no one's surprise, Lugia was a tremendous, varied threat in advanced Ubers that helped to shape and define the tier. Now on to Diamond and Pearl. Offensive power creep meant Lugia would no longer be messing around with offensive sets, since its defensive talents were needed too badly. Dialga and Garchomp were both introduced this generation and were terrifying new threats. The latter was even known as the Uber Killer, before it became Uber itself due to its excellent Palkia trolling speed, and to this day Lugia specifically invests in at least enough speed for it. Old threats such as Groudon and Rayquaza received new Pokemon tools such as Stone Edge for the former, Draco Meteor and buffed Outrage for the latter, and Life Orb for both. Lugia was here to shut them down with its trademark Reflect, Ice Beam, and Whirlwind set. Now, the introduction of Stealth Rocks did hinder it, of course, but it persevered as a stall cornerstone in spite of this. Recover got knocked down to 16 PP, so Lugia often traded it in for the new Roost, which was effective to remove some weaknesses in the face of Stone Edges and Ice Beams that were thrown at it, and this of course worked beautifully in conjunction with Pressure. In fact, Lugia was so important that every successful offensive team needed a strategy to at least try and break through it. Some used Thunderwave Groudon to slow Lugia down so it wouldn't be able to stall Groudon out later once it picked up a Swords Dance. Some used Encore and Tickle Wobbuffet in conjunction with Choice Band Sizzler's Pursuit, which is one of the few ways to actually kill a Lugia in one hit. Hell, some even used primarily special attackers such as Kyogre, Latios, Darkrai, and Mewtwo, who could even run Taunt or Self-Destruct just to make sure that Lugia couldn't pull anything on it. Lugia was mentioned as a stall cornerstone, and ironically, opposing stall teams were its greatest weakness. It's amazing at walling the scariest Pokemon in the game, but it's not going to do well against a more defensive approach. Invitations for Fortress and Skarmory to lay hazards, and in Fortress's case, threatened to spin away the hazards Lugia relied on to do damage, was definitely a weak point in its game. Plus, it wouldn't exactly get past other walls, such as Giratina Altered, or opposing Lugia very easily either. Now, even in Ubers, no Pokemon is perfect. However, make no mistake, Lugia was an incredible Pokemon in the Diamond and Pearl metagame, and integral to the success of many of the best teams around. And lo and behold, we actually have VGC, and VGC 2010 at that. In 2010, players were allowed to use 2 restricted Pokemon on their team. Now, honestly, Lugia was generally less preferable than the bigger guns such as Kyogre and Groudon due to its lack of offense. However, one player named Yasuki Tochigi found use in its defensive potential and reached second at Worlds with a set of Substitute, Earth Power, Blizzard, and Protect, and it often donned Life Orb. Now, aside from this match that was found, we don't know for sure what threats this Lugia was trying to destroy, but we can theorize that it sliced through the plethora of ice weaknesses around while warding off steals with Earth Power and using Substitute whenever their opponent would go for a Protect. And while its usage was otherwise nearly non-existent in favor of the more offensive big guns, Lugia at least made an appearance in a major way on the biggest stage, against Ray Rizzle in the finals of World in 2010. Now on to the weather generation. Arceus was released in full force in the 5th generation, and while Lugia was not quite a prime counter to some of the more popular variants like Electric and Ghost, it was excellent at holding off others such as Ground, Fighting, and Normal. That last typing of Arceus, also known as the famed Extreme Killer. In the previous generation, Lugia's biggest issue had been hazards, and the new kid on the Ubers block was the incredible, nearly omnipresent Ferrothorn. However, Lugia soon turned the tables by adopting a substitute shuffler set that avoided status and Leech Seed, and was even better than usual at PP stalling with pressure. And its new phasing toy in Dragon Tail made Lugia no longer taunt bait. It was used on several of the best teams around and continued to have a gravitating presence in the metagame. But then Black and White 2 was released, and the most notable difference was the release of Lugia's Dream World ability, Multiscale. Pressure was great and all, but Multiscale took Lugia to an entirely new level of unkillable. To give an idea, a super effective +6 Spooky Plate Judgment from standard Ghost Arceus is only a KO against standard Lugia about 62% of the time. In fact, we could list absurd calculations all day. I mean, we won't, but we could. Like the one where, with leftovers, Lugia can actually switch into Choice Specs Kyogre's Water Spout and still potentially stall it out. However, to continue listing absurd calculations would get pretty boring, honestly, so take our word for it. Multiscale Lugia cannot be killed. Now, to be fair, sure, Stealth Rock cut off Multiscale, but Lugia was already arguably the best wall around without it, and once it gets a roost off, well, good luck. Also, the new viable spinners like Excadrill and Rain Dish Tentacruel were quite helpful in keeping Lugia's side of the field rocks free. In fact, the addition of Genesect only added another Pokemon Lugia completely destroyed. Many players relied on Genesect's powerful U-turn to take out psychic types such as the Lati Twins and Mewtwo, but Lugia took none of that. However, despite all this, another threat emerged that struck fear in even Lugia, as well as the defensive team's Lugia thrived on, Kyurem White. With its Turbo Blaze ability, it could cut right through Multiscale, and its bone-chilling Choice Specs Ice Beam would one-hit KO even the mighty Lugia itself. This Pokemon, as well as Choice Band Zekrom and its Terravolt-driven Bolt Strikes, meant that even Multiscale Lugia could be brought to its knees. However, despite these terrifying examples, Lugia wasn't called the Great Wall for nothing, and continued to thrive in Ubers, so long as its teammates could provide it cover against these particularly terrifying threats. Now on to X and Y. The defog buff meant the options for keeping Lugia's multi-skill intact were more common than ever, and this was highly appreciated in the wake of Xerneas, the new most terrifying Pokemon in Ubers, capable of destroying entire teams after a Geomancy. And while Lugia wasn't exactly a hard counter, it was able to Whirlwind in a pinch, and thus neutralize the threat entirely for the rest of the game. Also, having a great counter to other dangerous threats, such as Mega Lucario and Mega Kangaskhan, was incredibly useful. Of course, new threats arose, namely Veltal and its powerful dark attacks as well as taunt, and great longevity thanks to Oblivion Wing and potentially Roost. And then of course the most dangerous one to Lugia being easily Mega Gengar with its Shadow tag. In fact, Lugia sometimes even ran Psychic just for Mega Gengar, although it was nice to have Psychic for Mega Blaziken and Lucario as well. However, Lugia remained a fixture on stall. In fact, with the release of Oras, it became even more important since Primal Groudon and Mega Salamence were now number 1 and number 2 in the tier. But even these mighty monsters stood no chance against the Great Wall, and Lugia racked up another notch in its belt as the pinnacle of defensive play. And finally, Sun and Moon. Players bemoaned power creep once more with the addition of frighteningly powerful Z-moves. But once again, Lugia stood in their way. As usual, it also stood in the way of new dangerous threats such as Zygarde Complete and Deoxys Attack firing off Psycho Boost in the psychic terrain provided by Tapu Lele, which Lugia also walled brutally. But other than that, it was business as usual for Lugia. In fact, it even featured alongside its counterpart Ho-Oh, now blessed with Regenerator, on some of the most ludicrously unbreakable stall teams ever. Alolan Muck existing to pursuit trap Mega Gengar was also a terrific boon. Then once Ultra Sun and Moon were released, a new true nemesis appeared. Duskmane Necrozma didn't care about Stealth Rock or Toxic, and its Sunsteel Strike, or the Z version, Searing Sunrays Smash, yeah, say that 3 times fast, slices right through Multiscale, meaning even Lugia is not a proper check after a Swords Dance. Necrozma Duskmane also packed Morning Sun and Toxic on defensive sets, and with that, even Lugia struggled to wall this monster. However, this is just one Pokemon, and Lugia remained the thorn in the side of just about every other Uber attacker out there. It dominated Mega Salamence even more with its Aerial Light nerf, and Primal Groudon of course still reigned, so Lugia retained plenty of important defensive use. And as for the later gens of VGC that actually allowed Ubers, Lugia sadly did not have any notable placements, or at least ones that we could find. And this is probably because its talents are more suited for singles, and you only get to pick 2 restricted Pokemon, to which most people picked the Primals or picked Mega Rayquaza or whatever. Yeah, you know the drill. And that's it. So how good was Lugia actually? Fans will be pleased to know that it was every bit as good and then some in the competitive Uber scene. Yeah, really, we all know Lugia is amazing, so. It was a defensive behemoth. While in the early days, it sometimes went a bit on the offensive, or entirely in the case of Advance's Choice Band variant, it's still so naturally bulky that it was always useful defensively, of course. It's always been the Pokemon that keeps the most dangerous Pokemon around in check. And with every generation's new, dizzyingly powerful Pokemon, it's become a constant that Lugia still somehow handles them. The level to which it withstands hits is simply astounding. In fact, upon Cresselia's Generation 4 debut, Cresselia was even dubbed the Lugia of OU, which speaks to how iconic Lugia is and what it does. So when you think Uber defense, you think Lugia. Lugia was simply unmatched in what it did. Thanks for watching, everyone, and as always, if you liked the video and you want to see more, be sure to subscribe to False Swipe Gaming for more weekly Pokemon content. And actually, next week I kinda have a promise to keep to all of you, so a certain fiery ape is being covered next week, so stay tuned for that. So in the comments, I guess just discuss what you think about competitive Lugia and whatnot. And of course, thank you so much to the patrons for continued support of our videos, and thank you to everyone else watching as well. And follow my crew on these social media platforms, and that's all I got. See you next time, everyone.